All right, good morning. We're continuing our Bible study. This is for May the 31st, 2026, and we're in Genesis chapter 19. Last time we ended with God promising Abraham that if God found 10 uh, righteous, good people in Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sodom rather, that God would not destroy the town, Sodom and Gomorrah. It's going to turn out that can't find 10. It's a bad place, bad place. So, and before I start, let me another prefatory remark. This chapter 19 is primarily about Lot. Remember, that's Abraham's nephew, and there's going to be a lot of contrast between Abraham and Lot, as well as um, Lot's fortunes being tied to his relationship with Abraham. So, chapter 19. The two angels, these are the angels, of course, that God sends ahead to bring back a report. And obviously, they are in human form. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Remember, the gate, in ancient times, the gate was like the public meeting place. A lot of legal issues were resolved in the gate. So when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, "My lords, turn aside, I pray. I pray to you, to your servant's house, and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." Again, Lot is doing the same thing Abraham did when Abraham met the two angels and God. He's offering what? Hospitality to the stranger. As I mentioned last time, this is a necessary convention in a time and place where there's no covering lawful authority outside of specific little tribes or cities, so that if you don't belong to one of these, you're fair game for robbery, murder, all sorts of things. So the expectation of hospitality was a way to keep people safe instead of traveling from one place to another. So Lot, and of course, not everyone followed this. I mean, bad people didn't, but Lot does. But they respond. They say, "No, we will spend the night in the street." Uh, why do they say that? Because they're trying to figure that they're trying to find out evidence. Is it safe? Is this place as bad as they've heard, or is it safe to just for a stranger to be out amongst the people? But Lot urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. So Lot knows what would happen if they stayed outside. He knows that they would be killed. Okay. Verse 4. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people of the last man surrounded the house. So here we have, God was saying, if you can find, if there are 10 good people there, I won't destroy the city. Well, it turns out and basically what we're talking about here is men, not women. Okay. So it turns out all the men, not all the men minus 10 or even minus 1, all the men, the whole city. Okay. Surround the house, and they call Lot. "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them." In other words, what they're saying is we want to sexually assault them and presumably also kill them. I mean, this is as far opposite from hospitality as you can possibly get. So then, verse 6, Lot went out to the door to the men, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." Isn't that horrible? Lot said, "You can have my 2 girls. Sexually assault them, kill them, whatever. But don't hurt these men." Now that horrifies us. But again, what it does is it just illustrates the times in which we're talking about here, where women, of course, have no value other than childbearing, of course, and child rearing compared to men. And when it comes to the convention of hospitality, that trumps everything. And so Lot, in the hierarchy of behavior and values, is actually following the convention, but it still is horrifying. It's horrifying that he would even um, want to sacrifice even one person. Okay, so Lot is not doing good here. Lot is showing himself to be way less of a moral creature than Abraham. And we're seeing, of course, that these, that when God said, "If I find 10 righteous people, I won't destroy the city." Not going to find 10. Verse 9. But they said, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came to sojourn, and he would play the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with him." So they're threatening Lot now, because remember, Lot is not from there. Remember when he and Abraham decided, when Abraham said, "Look, we can't all live in the same place. You pick one place, I'll go the other way." Lot was the one who decided, "I'll go down here towards Sodom and Gomorrah," and that's where he went. So he's a stranger to them too. He's been living with them, peacefully, but right now, because he won't turn over these two men to the inhabitants of the city, they said, "We're going to get you too. Okay, we'll kill you too." Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door, but the men put forth their hands, talking about the two angels, and brought Lot back into the house and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, small and great, so they wearied themselves groping for the door. So that ends the threat. Was the angels of what blinded all the men out there, so they can't do anything. Well, verse 12. Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we're about to destroy this place, because the outcry against this people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So everything that God had heard about this place turns out to be true. It's horrible. Horrible. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law who were to marry his daughters, "Up, get out of this place. The Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. Remember that they're men of the city too. They don't believe, so they're not going to join Lot and his daughters, to their dismay shortly. Verse 15. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." But he lingered. He doesn't want to leave. It's hard to understand why that is. Is he hoping that his two future sons-in-law will come along? He's not. Lot is not covering himself with great distinction here. So the men seized him and his wife and his two daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him forth and set him outside the city. In other words, God's going to save him in spite of himself. I mean, Lot is not listening to God's agents, but God's going to save him anyway. Why? Because he's Abraham's nephew. Okay. Verse 17. When they brought them forth, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Flee to the hills, lest you be consumed." In other words, you got to run and don't look back. And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life, but I cannot flee to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die." I'm not sure why he can't go up there. He just doesn't want to. Maybe he doesn't feel like he's strong enough. Maybe he doesn't think his daughters can get there. I don't know. It just says he's not. He says, verse 20, "Behold, yonder city is near enough to flee to, and it's a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." I think, I think Lot is saying, if I got to run away, let me go to a city where there's food and water and shelter. Don't send me up into the hills. I'm a city boy. I have no shot up in the hills. I don't want to go up there and live like an animal. The angel said to him, "Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Make haste, escape there, for I can do nothing till you arrive there." Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. So they let him go to a city, and they're not going to do anything until he's safe. Okay. Verse 24. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. In other words, it is total destruction. there is nothing left. It's just like scorched earth. And then verse 26, the one we're so familiar with. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. A pillar of salt. I don't know. I don't know what that particular incident serves other than to contrast, um, the man and the woman. But Lot is not any better. Okay, Lot's the one who's resisting being saved all along. So both he and his wife, not near the paragons that Abraham and Sarah are. And I think that's the point, contrasting Abraham and Sarah with Lot and his wife. But Lot is still saved, and his wife would have been too if she'd have just obeyed God. So that's another thing. If God tells you to go, you need to go. Okay. If God tells you don't look back, don't look back. All right. Verse 27. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And behold, and lo, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. So clearly the implication is the only reason that Lot is saved is because of God's relationship with Abraham. And so once again, remember Abraham had to rescue Lot in the war previously. So once again, Abraham, saves Lot and his little family. And it is true, this business about her turning into a pillar of salt, that part of the Middle East where this supposedly happened does look kind of like a moonscape. It's barren. It really does look like a place where God might have sent fire and brimstone down and completely eradicated whatever life was there. And the rest of this chapter deals with Lot. It's interesting, and it's not something we ever read in church. Verse 30. Now Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the hills with his two daughters. So he ends up in the hills anyway. Okay, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, so he dwelt in a cave with his two daughters. Don't know why he's afraid. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe he thinks the same thing's going to happen to Zoar that happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. Maybe he wasn't received with hospitality. Maybe the men of the city are looking at his daughters. So anyway, he leaves. He and his two daughters. And now we have this really strange little encounter here. Verse 31. And the firstborn said to the daughter, Our father is old. There's not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. In other words, there's no men here for us to have babies with. Come, let us make our father drink wine. We will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring through our father. Remember, a woman's worth in biblical times is measured by what? Can you have babies, and can you have lots of them? How many stories do we have of women who can't have babies being diminished or ridiculed? Think about Hannah, okay? Think about the Leah and Rebecca. It's over and over again. Women who cannot conceive and reproduce are considered to be less. And so these two young women, they know that. So we need to have children. So at least we may not have husbands, but we need to have children so we can at least have value in the eyes of our fellow female compatriots. Okay. Verse 33. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with the father. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. He must have been really drunk. Okay. On the next day, the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve offspring through our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger rose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Now this sounds bizarre, doesn't it? But remember, what is the first command in the Bible? Be fruitful and multiply. These girls are obeying the first commandment. Be fruitful and multiply any way you can, okay? Any way you can. And it also is this theme of new life. The place where they have lived has just been completely obliterated. No life left. Well, new life. Even in the midst of this chaos and destruction and horror, life will not be denied. And these girls, As is so often the case, if you read these texts in the Bible with a critical eye, you see the women so often are the real heroes of the stories, the ones who have the laser focus as to what needs to be done, where the men are just kind of screwing around. I mean, here's Lot. He couldn't decide if I'm going to leave. His wife turns around and gets turned into a pillar of salt. The girls, though, they see the future, and they know we got to have some kids. And they see nobody around to make that happen, so they do what they have to do, and they they obey the first command, and they come out to be much more focused and much more determined and heroic, if you will, than Lot or certainly his wife. Okay, they did what needed to be done. Verse 36. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. So this little story also serves as an etiology or a beginning. Where did the Moabites and Ammonites come from? And of course, we know also down the road that the Moabites and the Ammonites are enemies of the Israelites. And so it serves, this whole episode serves several purposes. So that's Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot is saved because of his relationship with Abraham. Lot tries to observe the expectation of hospitality to strangers. It does turn out to be bad. He is saved by God telling him to leave because of Abraham, and then we end up with new life in the face of death. Life in the face of death. That's a common theme throughout the Bible, that there's always life coming when it doesn't look like life is possible. Think about the resurrection. Okay, how about that? Well, we'll pick up chapter 20 next time, and we're going to find that Abraham inexplicably does not trust God in a situation that is difficult, which is going to lead us to, in a couple of chapters, to chapter 22, one of the great chapters in the Bible, where God says to Abraham, take your son Isaac and make a sacrifice of him. And I'll explain why God does that and why it's not as horrible as it seems to modern ears. But I will see you next time. We'll pick it up with Genesis 20. So peace.